The church hall was full. The guests whispered to each other, anxiously awaiting the moment when the bride would make her grand entrance. Camila, already dressed in white, stood behind the main door, tightly clutching her bouquet of flowers. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her hands were as cold as ice. Something inside her told her that something was wrong. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but everything seemed strange. She looked around and saw the expectant looks of the groomsmen and bridesmaids, all lined up in the aisle. The red carpet stretched all the way to the altar, where the priest was already waiting for her. The only thing missing was Leonardo, her fiancé, but he hadn't arrived yet. Camila felt a tightness in her chest. It was already past time. The wedding should have started 15 minutes ago, and yet nothing. Her father, elegant in his dark suit, approached and squeezed her shoulder. "I'm sure he's on his way, daughter," he said, but his voice wasn't as firm as she would have liked. Her mother, standing next to her, looked uncomfortable. Her eyes avoided Camila's. "Maybe there was a traffic jam," she suggested, forcing a smile. But Camila knew that Leonardo was never late. He was a meticulous man, always on time, and he certainly wouldn't do that at his own wedding. Something was wrong. The whispers were growing louder among the guests. The groomsmen exchanged discreet glances. The air was filled with a suffocating tension. Camila felt her breathing quicken. She needed to find out what was going on. I need a minute," she murmured, quickly moving away before anyone tried to stop her. Holding her voluminous dress, she went down a small side staircase and followed the aisle of the church. Her head was spinning. "Why am I so nervous? Is it just anxiety?" She tried to convince herself, but something inside her screamed that it wasn't just that. That's when she heard it. A muffled voice, mixed with low laughter, echoed from behind a half-open door. Camila stopped. Her skin crawled. It was Leonardo. She would recognize that voice anywhere. Her breath caught for a moment. He was there, just a few feet away, and he didn't seem to be alone. With her heart racing, Camila approached slowly, pushing the door open cautiously. The scene she saw on the other side made her stomach churn. Time seemed to stop. She blinked, as if her eyes were playing tricks on her, but the scene didn't change. There, in a corner of the small room, Leonardo was with Vanessa, his best friend. And they were close, very close. Camila felt a lump in her throat. The betrayal was right before her eyes. She felt like she was going to fall apart. But instead of falling to the floor, she turned on her heel and ran. From that moment on, nothing would be the same. Camila ran through the church hallways, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The heavy dress made it difficult for her to move, but adrenaline drove her every step. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. Leonardo, Vanessa, together. She wanted to vomit. Disgust and indignation mixed inside her like a storm. Her best friend, her fiancé. It was unbelievable. She stopped at the end of the hallway, leaning against the wall to catch her breath. She closed her eyes, trying to convince herself that this wasn't real. Maybe she was dreaming. A nightmare before the wedding, that's all. But the pain in her chest was too real to be a dream. Taking a deep breath, she decided to go back. She needed answers. Camila turned on her heel and, without hesitation, pushed hard on the door that was still ajar. Leonardo and Vanessa stepped away abruptly, as if they had been caught committing a crime. His eyes widened when he saw her there, and Vanessa put her hand to her mouth, completely speechless. The silence was cutting. Camila felt a bitter taste in her mouth. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry in front of them. What is this?" Her voice came out shaky, almost failing. Leonardo ran his hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable, but tried to maintain his composure. "Camila, you shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't be here?" she repeated, incredulous, feeling her indignation grow. "I'm the bride. Today is our wedding. And you. She couldn't finish the sentence. Her chest rose and fell quickly, trying to contain the avalanche of emotions that threatened to consume her. Vanessa, still unresponsive, took a step back. She looked like a child caught red-handed. Leonardo sighed and crossed his arms, as if he were about to make a big revelation. "That's not what you think." Camila laughed. She laughed nervously, with anger with disappointment. Then explain it to me, Leonardo. Explain what I just saw. He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then, finally, he spoke. Do you really believe that our wedding is about love? Camila blinked, confused. What? Leonardo took a step forward, now more confident. I like you, Camila. But let's be honest. Our marriage is nothing more than a business agreement. Our families are broken, and this union is the only way to save everything. It's just a contract. That's all. Camila felt a chill take over her body. Are you saying that? Her voice trailed off. Leonardo looked at her without any hesitation. This isn't a fairy tale. It never was. It was like a punch in the stomach. She stood there, still, while her mind tried to process what she had just heard. Everything she had lived in the last few years, every moment with Leonardo, every smile, every promise, was it all a lie? You never loved me? Her voice came out almost as a whisper. Leonardo looked away for a moment, then looked back at her. I like you, Camila. But love? Love doesn't pay the bills. Camila felt the tears come, but she held them back. And Vanessa? Leonardo gave a small smile, showing no remorse. She understands how things work. It's nothing serious, just a distraction. The pain Camila felt at that moment was sharp. She felt small, insignificant. How many times had she been wrong about that man? Her body trembled, and a bitter taste rose to her mouth. She felt sick, suffocated inside that heavy dress, suffocated inside that church, suffocated inside that lie. She needed to get out of there. Now. And that's exactly what she did. Camila turned on her heel and ran. She couldn't stay there for even a second longer. Her heart was pounding, and her breath was coming out in ragged gasps. Leonardo and Vanessa's voices were left behind, but they echoed in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She crossed the side aisle of the church in a hurry, holding her dress so as not to trip. The air seemed heavier. The world around her was blurry, as if everything was happening too fast and at the same time in slow motion. Camila, where are you going? Her father's voice sounded authoritative as he watched her hurry past. But she didn't answer. She couldn't answer. The church doors were right there. The large hall, packed with guests, fell silent as soon as they saw her appear alone. The whispers began immediately. What's going on? One aunt whispered to another. Where's the groom? Someone in the front row murmured. Camila's parents advanced toward her. Her mother's eyes were full of panic. Camila, what are you doing? Everyone's waiting. Camila took a deep breath, feeling her chest hurt. How could she explain? How could she say that the man she was supposed to marry was in the arms of another? That this marriage was nothing more than a ploy to save the family business? Her father held her arm tightly. His grip was strong, firm, as if he wanted to stop her from running away. You can't leave now, he said, his voice deep. This wedding has to happen. Camila felt a lump in her throat. He wasn't worried about her. He was worried about business. She pulled her arm away forcefully and took a step back. She wasn't going to submit to that. I'm not getting married. Her voice was firm, although her hands were shaking. The impact of her words was like a bombshell. Her mother's eyes widened. Her father stared at her coldly. The hall fell into absolute silence until a buzz filled the room. This has to be a joke, her mother said, her voice high-pitched. You're going back to that altar now, her father ordered. But Camila had already made up her mind. She wasn't going back. Never. Feeling her heart racing, she grabbed the voluminous skirt of her dress and ran. Camila, come back here, she heard her mother's voice behind her. She ignored it. She pushed open the church door and felt the fresh air from the street blow against her face. The sun was high, but the world around her seemed gray. She was running away from her own wedding. But where was she going? She couldn't go back home. Her parents wouldn't support her. Her friends? They were the same as Leonardo's, and now she no longer trusted anyone. Camila ran through the streets, aimlessly, without direction. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. She only knew one thing. She had to disappear. And then, as she turned a corner, she saw a simple house, hidden behind a neglected garden. The door was ajar. Without thinking, without hesitation, she entered. Camila closed the door behind her, pressing her back against the cold wood as she tried to catch her breath. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and her head was spinning. She had really done it. She had run away from her own wedding. The silence inside the house contrasted with the whirlwind in her mind. The place was small, simple, but cozy. There was a worn sofa, a wooden table with a few chairs, and a thin curtain that swayed gently in the wind that came in through a half-open window. It was then that she realized she was not alone. "Who are you, and what are you doing? What are you doing here?" The male voice made Camila jump. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked in the direction of the sound. A man was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a dish towel in his hand. He was watching her with a confused and wary look. Camila opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? I, she stammered, feeling her face burn. The man crossed his arms, clearly waiting for an explanation. He had dark, disheveled hair, a face marked by serious expressions and attentive eyes that analyzed her every move. "Did you break into my house?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. Camila swallowed hard. "Technically, yes. I needed a place to stay," she said quickly, unsure if her words made sense. The man let out a sigh, running his hand over his face as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but breaking into someone's house doesn't seem like the best solution," he said, pointing to the door. "You have to go." Camila felt panic rising inside her. She couldn't leave. Her parents might be looking for her outside. "Please, just let me stay here for a few minutes," she begged, her voice sounding more desperate than she would have liked. The man frowned hesitantly. Before he could answer, a soft sound of footsteps came from a nearby hallway. "Daddy, who's there?" Camila blinked in surprise as a little girl of about 6 years old appeared in the living room doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She had curly hair and was wearing pajamas with little stars on them. "Wow, are you a princess?" the little girl asked, looking at Camila with wonder. Camila looked down at herself and realized the absurd scene. She was standing there, wearing a dirty and wrinkled wedding dress, looking like something out of a movie. The man sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Alice, go back to your room." But the girl ignored him and walked over to Camila, holding a piece of the dress with her little fingers. "Your dress is torn. What happened?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Camila felt a lump in her throat. How would she explain to a child that she had run away from her own wedding because her fiancé was cheating on her? She forced a smile and bent down to the girl's level. "It's a long story, dear," she said softly. Alice gave a small, excited smile. "Is it like a fairy tale? Did you run away from the castle?" Camila laughed lightly, surprised at how that childish question made sense for her situation. The man crossed his arms and let out a long sigh. "My name is Diego. And you?" Camila hesitated for a moment. Should she say her real name? But deep down, she knew there was no point in lying. "Camila," he answered. Diego nodded thoughtfully. "Okay, Camila. I don't usually receive unexpected visitors, much less runaway brides," he said, pointing to the dress, "but I think you're in trouble." Camila lowered her head, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "You have no idea," she murmured. Diego took a deep breath and scratched his beard, clearly trying to decide what to do. After a moment of silence, he looked at Alice, who was still staring at Camila curiously, and then turned his gaze to the woman in front of him. "Okay, you can stay here for now, but tomorrow morning we'll sort this out." Camila let out a sigh of relief. For the first time that night, she felt like she had found a refuge, even if it was temporary. Camila sat on the couch, feeling her body relax for the first time in hours. She didn't know whether to cry or be grateful. The soft warmth of the house contrasted with the coldness of the church, where her life had been turned upside down. Diego watched her from a standing position, still suspicious. He clearly didn't know what to make of that woman dressed in a wedding dress in the middle of his living room. Alice, on the other hand, was enchanted. She sat next to Camila, holding a piece of her torn dress. "Are you hungry?" she asked, tilting her head. Camila blinked, surprised by the question. The truth was that she didn't even know when she had last eaten. With all the tension of the day, her stomach felt like a knot. Before she could answer, Diego sighed and went to the kitchen. "I'll make some coffee. You look like you need it." Alice clapped her little hands together excitedly. And bread and butter, Daddy. Camila watched the interaction between the two and felt a pang in her chest. It was such a simple moment, but filled with a kind of affection that she had never experienced with her parents. Minutes later, Diego returned with a steaming mug and a plate with 2 slices of bread. He placed it on the table in front of her. Here, it's not a wedding banquet, but it will do. Camila let out a nervous laugh and picked up the cup. The strong smell of coffee calmed her instantly. Thank you. As she took a sip, Diego sat across from her, crossing his arms. Now tell me, who are you running away from? Camila looked at him, holding the cup between her hands. Where to start? She took a deep breath. I was going to get married today. Everything was ready. The church was full. But Leonardo never showed up at the altar. Alice widened her eyes. The prince ran away? Camila let out a sad laugh. More or less that, except that, in fact, it was I who ran away. Diego frowned. Why? Camila lowered her eyes, the weight of the truth falling on her again. She still couldn't believe what she had discovered. I found my fiancé with someone else. My best friend. Silence filled the room. Diego didn't say anything for a moment, just rubbed his chin in thought. What a bastard. Alice made an O with her mouth shocked. Your prince is a villain. Camila laughed, even though the pain was still there. It seems so. She took another sip of coffee, feeling the hot drink warm her broken heart a little. But that wasn't all, she continued. He told me that our marriage was just an agreement. A business move to save our families from bankruptcy. I was never really important. Diego shook his head slowly, as if he was digesting everything. And your parents? Did they know about that? Camila sighed. They wanted me to get married no matter what. It didn't matter if I was being cheated on. All that mattered was the money. Diego let out a dry laugh. It seems that your family and your happiness can't exist in the same sentence. Camila couldn't deny it. That was exactly how she felt. Alice tugged lightly on the sleeve of her dress. Are you going to stay here now? Camila looked at the little girl and felt a pang in her heart. She wanted to say yes, that she was safe here, but the truth was that she had nowhere to go. Diego stared at her, as if he could read her thoughts. Look, I said you could spend the night, and I won't go back on my word. But tomorrow you need to decide what you're going to do. Camila nodded slowly. Tomorrow, she repeated, not knowing what the future held for her. That night, for the first time in a long time, she slept without knowing what would come next. The morning sun invaded the small room, spreading golden rays through the thin curtains. Camila blinked a few times before remembering where she was. She was no longer a bride waiting at the altar. Now, she was just a woman without direction, trying to figure out what to do. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and she heard the sound of footsteps coming from the kitchen. Diego. Good morning, runaway princess. He appeared in the doorway of the room, holding a cup. Camila laughed, shaking her head. I never thought I would hear that so soon after running away from my own wedding. Diego smiled at the corner of his mouth and held out the cup. Well, it turns out that my daughter is convinced that you are a real princess. I didn't want to ruin her fantasy. Camila took the cup and took a sip, feeling the comforting warmth of the drink. It was a small moment of normality amidst the chaos that her life had become. But the calm would not last long. A loud noise outside caught both of their attention. A car screeched to a halt in front of the house. Camila's heart raced. She knew this moment would come. Camila! Her mother's voice echoed through the street, full of urgency and irritation. Camila froze. They had found her. Diego looked out the window and snorted. You better decide what you want to do quickly. Camila felt her breathing quicken. She didn't want to go back. She didn't want to face Leonardo, much less her parents, who would probably try to convince her to reconsider everything. Camila's mother's hurried footsteps echoed on the stone floor of the house's entrance. The knock on the door came soon after. Camila, open this door now. Diego crossed his arms and glared at her. What do you want me to do? Camila felt her stomach churn. She wasn't ready to face anyone, but she knew that running away forever was an option. Taking a deep breath, she made a decision. I don't want to see them. Not now. Diego nodded and approached the door. He turned the doorknob calmly and opened it just enough to face the woman waiting on the other side. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Camila's mother's eyes widened when she saw him. "Who are you?" she asked, clearly surprised. "Where's my daughter?" Diego leaned against the doorframe. "I don't think she wants to talk to you right now." The woman huffed, irritated. "I don't care what she wants. This wedding needs to happen." Camila heard everything from the other side of the room and felt her heart tighten. Nothing had changed. To her parents, she wasn't a daughter, she was a piece on a board. Diego's blood boiled. He looked back to where Camila was standing and saw the anguished expression on her face. Then he turned back to the bride's mother. "You know what?" he said, crossing his arms. "If you really cared about your daughter, you wouldn't be here demanding that she marry a traitor." Camila's mother opened and closed her mouth, surprised by his boldness. "You don't understand anything about our lives. And apparently, you don't understand anything about your daughter either." Diego closed the door in her face before she could answer. Silence reigned for a few seconds. Camila looked at Diego, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "You just closed the door in my mother's face." He shrugged. She deserved it. Camila felt a lump in her throat. For the first time in her life, someone truly defended her. But deep down, she knew the battle was far from over. Camila remained silent, staring at the closed door while her heart was still beating fast. They had really found her. The weight of that reality fell on her like a crumbling wall. She couldn't hide forever. Diego sighed and went back to the kitchen, picking up the cup of coffee forgotten on the table. "Your parents won't give up that easily." He looked at Camila seriously. She rubbed her face with her hands. "I know." Alice appeared in the hallway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Why are you yelling?" Camila forced a smile, trying to hide her tension. "Nothing important, dear." The girl looked from one to the other, clearly suspicious, but ended up going back to her room, hugging a teddy bear. Diego watched Camila for a moment before speaking again. "What do you intend to do now?" She opened her mouth to answer, but closed it again. What did she want to do? Run away forever? Hide until her parents gave up? She had no answers. Before she could think better, she felt a slight nausea and put her hand to her stomach. The discomfort came strong and sudden. Dizziness took over her body, and she had to hold on to the table to keep from falling. Diego frowned. "Hey, are you okay?" Camila took a deep breath, tried to shake off the discomfort. I just need some air." But the nausea didn't go away. On the contrary, something was wrong. The thought crossed her mind so quickly that it made her eyes widen. "No, she couldn't be. I'm taking you to the doctor," Diego said, already grabbing the car keys. "No need." Camila tried to refuse, but Diego didn't accept an argument. Minutes later, they were at the small clinic in the city. The office was modest but cozy. The doctor, a woman with a soft voice, examined Camila carefully before finally asking the question that left her paralyzed. "Is there a possibility that you are pregnant?" Camila's world stopped. "Pregnant?" She felt her breath catch. She looked at Diego, who also seemed taken aback. The doctor waited patiently while Camila tried to find words. I don't know." But deep down, she knew. The dates made sense. The symptoms, too. The discomfort. The dizziness. The delay that she didn't notice in the midst of the wedding chaos. The doctor smiled gently. "Let's do a test to be sure." And minutes later, the confirmation came. Camila was pregnant. The shock ran through her body like a lightning bolt. She left the office in silence, feeling as if she were floating. Diego walked by her side, respecting her silence. He waited until they were back in the car before he finally spoke. "Camila, what are you going to do?" She clenched her fingers on her legs. Her heart was in a mess. "I don't know." Her voice came out almost as a whisper. She had never felt so lost. And now, she had more than just her own future to decide. The car was parked in front of Diego's house, but Camila couldn't move. The test in her hands felt like it weighed a ton. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Leonardo. The thought was suffocating her. How could something so small inside her change everything? "Do you want to come in?" Diego asked quietly, respecting her silence. Camila blinked, coming back to reality. "Yes," she answered, but her voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. She got out of the car and walked into the house in silence. Each step seemed heavier than the last. Alice appeared in the living room and ran to Camila, hugging her leg. "You took a while. I was playing with Daddy while I waited for you." The child's innocent touch brought a pang to Camila's heart. She would have a child too. But what if her child never had a safe home like that? She forced a smile at Alice and ruffled her hair. "I'm glad you had fun." But Diego noticed that Camila was pale and distant. He waited until Alice went to play in another room before approaching and asking, in a low, careful tone, "Do you want to talk about it?" Camila ran her hands over her face, feeling her head throb. I don't know. "Do you want to have this baby?" The question was direct. Camila took a deep breath. She still didn't know. How could she be the mother of Leonardo's child, of a man who betrayed her, lied to her, and destroyed everything she believed in? "I need time," she murmured. Diego nodded. "You have it, but you know you can't run away from this decision forever." She knew that, but at that moment, what she wanted most was to run away. And that was when that fate had brought her back to reality in the worst possible way. A loud knock on the door. The two looked at each other. Camila felt panic rising. Diego walked to the window and looked through the crack in the curtain. His jaw tightened. "It's him." The air left Camila's lungs. "Leonardo?" Diego nodded. "And your parents too." Camila felt the world spin. They didn't give up. The knock on the door came louder. "Camila, we know you're there." Leonardo's voice sounded arrogant from outside. "Stop this nonsense and get out. We need to talk." Her heart was pounding. What should she do? Diego looked at her, waiting for her decision. "Do you want me to answer it?" Camila clenched her fists. She knew that running away forever was not an option. Taking a deep breath, she made a decision. "No." She turned around and, with firm steps, walked to the door. This time, she would face her past head-on. Camila stopped in front of the door, taking a deep breath. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it was about to explode. Behind her, Diego watched silently, ready to intervene if necessary. The knock came again, impatient. "Camila, open this door now." Her father's voice sounded authoritative, cold, just like it always was. She turned the doorknob slowly and opened it just enough to face the people outside. And there they were. Leonardo, in a suit, impeccable as if nothing had happened. His cynical eyes and that arrogant little smile. Behind him, Camila's parents. Her mother looked distressed, but her father was serious, rigid, as if he expected her to give in without argument. Finally, Leonardo smiled, as if it were just a whim of hers. "Now, can we talk like adults?" Camila crossed her arms. "I have nothing else to talk to you about." His smile faltered for a second, but then returned. "Don't be dramatic. You know you can't run away from this wedding." Camila laughed. She laughed nervously, in revolt, at everything she had held in for so long. "Run away? I'm not running away. I'm breaking free from this prison." Her mother's eyes widened. "Camila, please. You know what's at stake." Her father, on the other hand, was more direct. "You can't embarrass us like this. You need to go back and marry Leonardo. It's the only way to save everything." The same old story. Camila felt a tightness in her chest. For years, she had tried to be the perfect daughter. The woman who pleased her parents, who followed the rules, who did everything as expected. But what did she want? She instinctively put her hand to her belly. Now, it wasn't just about her. Leonardo noticed the gesture and narrowed his eyes. "Camila, is there something you want to tell me?" She felt her breath catch. He didn't know yet. For a second, she thought about hiding it, about lying. But then she realized she didn't owe him anything. "I'm pregnant." The silence was cutting. It was as if time had stopped. Her mother brought her hands to her face. Her father remained impassive, but his eyes shone with something that seemed like calculation. And Leonardo laughed. "That just makes things easier. Now, you have even more reason to come back." Camila narrowed her eyes. "Do you really think that changes anything? You betrayed me, deceived me, and used me as a business deal. I don't want anything to do with you." Leonardo took a step forward. "Camila, think about it. This baby has to be born within a marriage. We can forget everything that happened." She shook her head. "I can't forget because you don't regret it. To you, none of this matters. I'm not your priority, Leonardo. I never was." He took a deep breath, his tone changing from gentle to cold. If you don't come back with me, you'll regret it. Is that a threat? Diego finally spoke, crossing his arms next to Camila. His voice was firm, sure. Leonardo glared at him with disdain. And who are you anyway? A small-town hero? Diego didn't back down. I don't need to be a hero. I'm just here to make sure Camila isn't forced to do anything she doesn't want to do. Leonardo huffed, irritated. Camila's father intervened, his patience running out. Camila, I won't say it again. If you turn your back now, you'll be out of our family. You won't have our support anymore. You'll face the world alone. She felt a chill run down her spine. But then she realized something. She had been alone for a long time. When had her parents ever truly supported her? When had they ever cared about her happiness? Never. She took a deep breath, feeling a new strength grow within her. Then, I'd rather face the world alone than live trapped in a lie. Her father stared at her for a few seconds. Then, without saying anything else, he turned and left. Her mother hesitated, tears in her eyes. Daughter! But Camila didn't answer. She couldn't live trying to please them anymore. Leonardo stayed behind, still processing what had happened. He looked at Camila once more and laughed. You'll never make it without us. You will regret it. Camila, don't. She replied. She simply closed the door. And at that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. Camila leaned against the closed door, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. She was finally free. Free from the lies. Free from the suffocating expectations. Free from the idea that she needed to sacrifice herself to please others. She took a deep breath, trying to absorb reality. It was scary, but at the same time liberating. Diego watched her silently, respecting the moment. He knew that this decision had not been easy. What now? He asked softly. Camila looked at him, then at Alice, who was watching from the hallway with curious eyes. Then instinctively, she touched her belly. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. Her life began now. Now I start from scratch. My way. Diego smiled at the corner of his mouth. Good choice. In the days that followed, Camila slowly rebuilt herself. She found a job, rented a small apartment, and began to plan her new life. The past still tried to haunt her at times. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, fearing that it was all a mistake, that she wouldn't be able to handle it. But for the first time, she was in charge of her own story. Diego and Alice had become an essential part of her journey. Alice called her my princess, and Diego, well, he was a friend. Maybe something more. But Camila knew she didn't need to rush anything. She had already lived her entire life, trying to live up to other people's expectations. Now, for the first time, she just wanted to be herself. Months later, the day of the birth arrived. And when she held her baby in her arms for the first time, tears streamed down her face. He was perfect. She wrapped him carefully in her arms and whispered, "You are loved, and you always will be." Diego was there, by her side. Alice was there too. She wasn't alone. She never would be again. And in that moment, Camila knew. Her past didn't define her. Her future was hers to write. And for the first time in a long time, she was at peace.